Hey everybody, it's Alan from the Rackspace community team. We're here with a hangout, one of our Office Hours Hangouts. Drew, how you doing today, Drew?
Doing great. How are you?
Oh, not too shabby, not too shabby. We're going to do a little bit different hangout here. It's not live today. We're just going to talk real quick about some backup strategies. Now, we had actually done a hangout a long time ago, almost 2 years ago now, about some backup strategies, and that one has been lost to the ether.
Sadly, yes.
Sadly. And we wanted to kind of come back and distill some of that information and see if we could kind of share that again.
Oh, it's a shame because that was probably our best show ever.
Absolutely,
It was
absolutely.
gold.
The sombrero that you were wearing and the yeah, it was quite impressive. But
Things have changed since then, so there are more options. There are more components to backup. Some of the principles, though, of backups are the same.
Yeah, exactly.
So we'll be able to steal a little bit from that show, what we spoke on there, but really it's going to be important to cover everything all encompassing now that we're 2 years out from that show with the additional products we have.
yeah, so let's start off and talk about why you would want to back up. I mean, I think that it's something that we think about a lot because we help customers with this question, but I think there are some people that might not know why you would want to back up. So let's talk about some of the reasons why you might want to back up your data.
Well, sure. There's definitely going to be an expense depending on how you go about your backup strategy, but there's value in that data, and that's one of the biggest things that I speak on is that is the value. That's the why. Is you've got data, you've got content, you've got code, you've got all of these components that have value to you. They allow you to do what you're currently up to
Right.
with your business, be it an application that you run, a back-end system, or a website.
Yeah, and I mean you have spent some expense to produce this data,
At least
right?
time.
Yeah, time, and that's very valuable. And you've done something to create this, so it's a great way to ensure that you keep that and you keep that available to you if something should happen to it.
Absolutely. There's also some situations where you're going to have some compliance concerns where you have to have long enough back in time that you can reference for that compliance concern. And also it's just good to have a backup if you need to recover quickly from an issue.
Right, and I think that's the thing that needs to be said. I mean, the question is, hey, Alan, why are you even suggesting that we back up? Isn't Rackspace the best host in the world? Well, while I happen to think so, I think that we also need to acknowledge that we are talking about, oftentimes virtual servers, which are hosted on physical servers.
Yep.
And any server in the world, any hard disk in the world, over enough time will have an issue and will start to fail. It's rare that it is catastrophic enough that it takes down an entire host machine with servers on it, but it does happen. And
it's rarer still that entails data loss, but everyone who's been in this technology age long enough has had a machine that has died for one reason or another.
Right.
Not just gone obsolete, but you start hearing that occasional scary sound coming from the drives it spins up. And when you lose things like family pictures or music catalog or any number of things like that, that's painful. You can't replace pictures of your kids from their early days. That's just something that's gone forever. And that's a personal thing, but it may draw that correlation and show some of that value of maybe you've built an incredible catalog of customers. You have an email list that's incredibly valuable to you because it keeps you in touch with your customers. And if you lose something like that, it's not going to be replaceable. It's not going to be an easily recovered or recoverable situation to find yourself in.
right, and I think that that's the end result of a good backup strategy is an easy recovery.
Absolutely.
Right, and that's what you want to have. You want to have some peace of mind that your data is going to be available, and then in the event that something does happen, you want to be able to easily recover that. And so that's what we want to outline today is kind of how to create something that that provides you that peace of mind and also an easy backup strategy. So let's talk about we've already covered the why. Let's talk about the what. What needs to get backed up, yeah, we'll go from there. So what components do you want to back up?
Well, I always revert back to look at your business, look at what's important to you. If you run a database, that's going to be your lifeblood. If you're tracking new data and loading that database up with important content, Well, that's clearly what you're going to need to protect. If you have specific application you've built, then the code for that application is the lifeblood of that business. If you have files that you curate, it's going to be those files. If you have a site, it's going to be all of the components necessary for that site to run. So your situation may be very targeted and small. It may be very broad. But anything that allows you to operate your business or your organization is going to be an important component to consider.
Yep. I want to look at it in a range of, you want to back up basically everything in some way, right? Because there's very little that you want to just leave off and let it go away. Now, some of that is just going to be inherently backed up. Like the system image itself is going to have a lot of the the prerequisites that you need for your application, right? So you don't really need to back that up because the makers of your distribution have already done that for you. But on top of that, you're going to have some settings and some configurations that are on there, and that's a very static component of your entire system, right?
Absolutely.
So you would have files that are configuration files that govern the way that your system works, right? Next up in this spectrum of very static content to very dynamic content would be your code, right? And that's largely going to stay the same. Obviously, we see a lot of people that iterate fast and make changes. However, even someone that's making changes on a daily basis to their code base, I mean, they have that's not going to be as dynamic as, say, the files that are uploaded, the content that's uploaded. If your users are uploading content, uploading audio, video files, photos, things like that, that's going to change frequently. And then the database that you have that runs this is all going to be very dynamic, right? So it's going to be changing frequently. And I think when you look at that spectrum of very static to very dynamic, that kind of gives you a guideline of what you want to back up and how you want to back that up.
How often it needs to be backed up.
Right, exactly. And something like your system image, we'll get to kind of the actual logistics of that. That probably doesn't need to be backed up very frequently at all. I mean, having that backup is key. But you might want to just do that once a month or something like that, just for peace of mind.
Well, your system, if it's something that you can easily replicate, let's say you didn't change a thing, you run a CentOS 6 server, you spun that server up, and you didn't make any configuration changes, you just ran it vanilla. Your backup is basically the system image that you were provided when you built that device. So you can always lean on Rackspace to have that device there until it's been end-of-lifed. It's a good idea to get a backup once you hear that it's end-of-life if you rely on it.
Yeah.
But that's a backup. If you made configuration changes, you'll want to make sure that image that you've customized and tailored for your needs is available to you as well, so you don't have to go and rework everything you did for that original change.
Yeah, and one of the things that is really helpful is to use, maybe you have a user that you want to have on all of your system images, right? The user that can log in and make those changes administratively. Maybe they have a special SSH key that you want to make sure is included in that image. So once you get that configuration set up, create that image and use that to build any additional servers, right?
Absolutely. And as you're thinking through what's important to have backed up, assign that out. Make sure that you give it to the right person so that they'll know their job. They'll know more often so in the situation of code. Let's say you've got developers that are working on the 2.0 version of your project. They'll know when they made changes. So if they're using something like GitHub for version control, that has some inherent backups. But let's say you've got a DBA who's working on the database. That person's going to know more aptly when major changes have happened, but also is going to know how dynamic that database is and how often you're going to need to make sure it's covered and you have that backup for it. So once you've decided what needs to be backed up, assign that out to the right person for that job.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, that could be any different number of people. I mean, in a small organization, that might be just that one person that wears a whole bunch of different hats, and it might be someone that individuals or multiple individuals that do those.
Absolutely.
All right, cool. So now we know kind of what we want to back up, when we want to back it up, and let's talk about how we actually go about backing it up.
Yeah. There's really a handful of things to consider here. One of which is backing it up local to the machine. So you may use something like a time capsule for or time machine for your Mac if you're a Mac user. Well, that's backing up your content externally. You may also have that older version of that file that you keep on your machine locally on the actual laptop or computer. That's the difference between having a local backup and a remote backup. Now, if they're in the same house, it's not terribly remote, but it's not on the device. So if you were to drop your machine and it would break, you have a copy you can go get elsewhere. In the cloud, it's very similar. You can back up content to the cloud server itself, and you can back up content to cloud files. Now, in the situation of a database, you'll want to do a database dump to your local machine so that you can have a static copy to then export to cloud files. That's going to give you redundancy, but it's also a special caveat to consider with the database. When it's running, you may take a snapshot of that device, but have a table that's currently being altered. So you have a corrupt backup of that device. You need a specific tool to back up a database. So something for Linux would be Holland. That's what we typically deploy with our managed operations and our managed cloud devices. And for Windows Backup will do that just fine as well. That would put a local copy of that database on the device database. So that's not redundant in the sense of it being in multiple locations, but it is redundant in the sense that you have another copy of your database that lives there on the machine as well.
Yeah, I think it really depends on like how horrible are things screwed up, right? So if something just gets a little bit screwed up and you say, okay, well, hey, we need to roll back to that database that was dumped as a flat file 45 minutes ago. Let's go back and roll that back 45 minutes. Now, if the entire server or something like that goes down, well, then now you're in trouble because you only have that flat file and it's 45 minutes old, so that's not a terribly large amount of time that you need to roll back. However, it's inaccessible because the entire server's down. That's why we want to get it off of that machine, and Holland is the perfect tool for that. We found on Linux machines and again Windows backup on Windows machines, and we want to couple that with the Rackspace backup product, right? Cloud backup, which actually takes data directly off of your cloud servers at a specified interval, right? Even up to the multiple times an hour, I believe. That is going to cost you some CPU cycles, of course, to do that. So got to balance it. But it takes it off of the local machine and puts it into our Cloud Files product, which is great because then you don't have to worry about it being on that machine anymore. The machine goes down, spin up from an image that you created, right? A static image of your system, because that's not going to change very often. Hopefully you have your code in some type of a subversion, a Git, something like that, so you have version control and can easily move your code on. And then you just take take the Cloud Files backup that you have and reincorporate that data right back into your server. And that can happen relatively frequently, and depending on how much effort and time you want to spend up front with your application so that it does it on its own when that needs to happen.
Yeah, and it's important that we clarify there's two types of backups, I would say, at Rackspace. One is going to be a server image, and that's going to capture the system disk if that's the way that the server is deployed, or the entire disk of the server. It can also be used in reference to block storage, so you can take a snapshot of a block storage device, and that basically captures everything. In the situation where it's a system disk or the entire cloud server, that's going to include the operating system. So there's going to be some cost associated with backing up those components that came with the server when it was built first. But it's also going to grab everything else. It will not grab the data disk if you have a server that's got a system and a data disk. So that needs to be considered in your backup strategy. And it may include using cloud backup to capture that data in the data disk. But that's going to be the whole thing. It's going to bundle the whole image up and store it in cloud files for you. Cloud backup, on the other hand, is going to be file level. So you go in and specify exactly what you want backed up and when, and those specific components are stored in cloud files, and it's done in a differential way. So the first time it backs it up, it backs the whole thing up. well, everything you've specified.
Right.
And then after you've backed up those components, it looks for changes. And when there's a change, it just backs up that change, so you get a differential. And that's going to be more efficient from a cost and from a space standpoint. And it's just a faster way of going about it moving forward instead of grabbing the entire server or something along those lines.
And we've seen a lot of people that have tried to use scheduled images, right? So do a daily image of my entire server, back everything up, right? Well, as you mentioned before, that's not going to be terribly effective for databases, because if a table's in the middle of being written, that's not going to be captured, right? You can have some data corruption at that point in time. And then also just from a cost perspective, because we charge for the storage of those images by the gigabyte, is going to be a lot more size. You might not have changed any files, right? Or you might have changed 20 kilobytes worth of files, but you're going to back up an entire 400 or 500 megabytes worth of data, perhaps, each time you go.
You're going to catch the operating system every time you go by.
Every time.
And the operating system is likely not going to change. So why capture it if it's not necessary? So it is good for we built a server, we tailored it for our needs. It's good to have that version available to you, but it's not necessarily going to be an effective way or an efficient way of backing up little changes that you make as you go.
Yeah, absolutely not. And so that's why we've kind of broken it out this way. And I think there was a lot of confusion when we first started to do a system disk backup. Have the system partition versus the data partition, right? A lot of people were confused by that because they had been used to only using the image capabilities to back up their entire system. And we think that the better way to do it, the more efficient way to do it, and definitely the safer way to do it, is to break out those images. Or break out that process. So you have your image, and that's one component of it, and then you have your files, and that's another component of it. So it's much more efficient to do that. And I've actually seen people be able to recover from a host machine that goes down, be able to recover faster by spinning up a new server based on the image, incorporating their files from backup. They can do that faster than we can, manually migrate those servers and get them on new machines. So,
yeah, the way we typically recommend you approach a snapshot is going to be take them on demand when you have a benchmark change, or set them up for scheduled when there's going to be a lot of different people doing a lot of different things. And then once that stretch of interaction is over, then you can stop that. If you're in a stable place, then you can delete those backups you've created, or those snapshots you've created.
Right.
Backup is something that you should always have running and capturing those important and volatile files.
Yeah, and you have some capacity to control when your operating system, when your system itself is changed, right? But if you are running a service, your users are going to be the ones that control when those files change. You're not going to know when that happens. So you can't necessarily schedule that. That's why we recommend running that continually running on a schedule differential backup that's only going to get the changes that have happened. And again, it just makes it much easier to get back up and running.
Absolutely. And that's really the name of the game, is to secure your environment, secure your data, and be able to recover it quickly if there was an issue. And there are any number of ways that there could be an issue, but this is the first step in resiliency and redundancy, is having your data in more than one place and quickly recoverable.
Yeah, so I think that's it. I mean, that's kind of what we wanted to cover. We wanted to cover the couple of different ways that you can back up, why you'd want to do that, and then once you get started, how you can get it set up.
And no one's going to be surprised I'm going to say this, but once you have a backup strategy in place, it's imperative that you go through the process of recovering as a fire drill. So practice. Just backing it up is not enough. In a situation where you use a snapshot and that's what you're leaning on, and you restore and the database is corrupt, you don't want to be in that situation in production. You want to find those types of caveats before you run into that problem. So go through the practice of a fire drill where you restore data from a previous backup, from any of those components that you're utilizing, so that you know how to go through the process quickly. You know where the potholes might be, and you you can iron out in even that practice session and not in the heat of battle or in the moment where you've got to be back up and running for the stability of your business.
Yeah, that's a great point. So figure out your backup strategy, implement your backup strategy, test your backup strategy.
Absolutely. Trust but verify.
All right. Well, hey, I guess that's it for this episode of Office Hours Hangouts. You can check us out on the Rackspace YouTube channel and at the Rackspace community at community.rackspace.com. Take it easy, everybody.
Next week.